The helicopter roared as it forced its way down through the thin mountain air, its twin rotors fighting against the sharp Afghan winds. Commander Robert pressed his face close to the grit-covered window of the forward operations base, his eyes narrowing against the haze of dust that rose from the landing zone. He had watched many birds come in before, but this descent was different. The Chinook bucked and twisted like a wounded animal, each shudder a reminder that the Hindu Kush never made things easy for anyone who dared fly through its valleys. Robert had been waiting for this particular arrival for weeks. The orders from higher command had been vague, shrouded in the kind of cryptic language that set old instincts stirring. The message had spoken of specialized personnel, of enhanced overwatch capability, and of a new asset that might either save lives or make the mission twice as complicated. In his 15 years of service, he had learned to distrust such phrases. Vague words often meant the battlefield itself was about to change shape. The rear ramp of the Chinook dropped with a heavy metallic groan. Figures began spilling out one by one. A pair of analysts clutched their laptops as if those machines were life preservers in a storm. A medic carried cases of supplies. 3 replacement soldiers stepped into the swirling dust, faces tight with fatigue. Standard rotation. Nothing new. Robert almost turned away, expecting nothing more than routine. Then she appeared, a figure barely 5'4", even in heavy boots, her stride controlled and precise. Each movement seemed calculated to waste no energy. She carried across her back a weapon that drew Robert's eyes immediately, a massive Barrett rifle, the kind that weighed 30 pounds even before it was loaded. Most soldiers struggled to carry it all. She moved as if it were a natural extension of her body. A mortar round tore into the earth 200 meters from the landing zone. The ground shook, dirt and metal fragments lifted skyward. Soldiers instinctively dove for cover. The analysts threw themselves down so hard Robert half expected to see their outlines etched in the dirt. The medics scrambled. Every man and woman who had trained for combat sought the safety of bunkers and blast walls, but not her. She kept walking, calm, unhurried. Each step measured like she was strolling through a quiet park rather than a battlefield. A second mortar screamed down and burst even closer. The concussion rattled windows of the command post where Robert stood. Yet her pace did not change. Her posture remained steady. No flinch, no hesitation, no instinctive duck to the blast. Robert realized he was holding his breath as she closed the distance toward the operations center. Only when she reached the doorway did she pause to adjust the weight of the rifle across her back before vanishing inside. At Robert's elbow, Sergeant Michael muttered, "Should we move to secure her, sir?" Robert shook his head slowly, his gaze fixed on the spot where she had disappeared. "No, I think we just met our new sniper." His weathered face curved into a slow smile. For weeks the Pentagon's message had nagged at him. Now it made sense. They had not sent a new soldier, they had sent a weapon carved in a human form. That night, in his small office lit by a single hanging bulb, Robert broke the wax seal on the personnel file delivered with her. He had seen countless classified documents in his career, thick folders filled with numbers, kill counts, operations, failures buried in black ink. But something about this one made his stomach tighten, as if the ground beneath him were shifting. The cover sheet looked ordinary. Military bureaucracy at its plainest. Staff Sergeant Sophia. Infantry. Sniper. Nothing. Remarkable. Yet his instincts whispered otherwise. He flipped the first page and nearly spilled his coffee across the desk. Confirmed kills 127. Robert froze, his mind doing the math. The average sniper rarely reached 20 in a deployment. Even the legends of past wars carried numbers that seemed small compared to this. One man in Vietnam had been remembered for 93 across an entire career. But here was a woman who already had 127. And then came the detail that made him tremble. Longest confirmed shot, 3,247 meters. Robert blinked, rubbed his eyes, calculated quickly. That was over 2 miles. The world record in the books was 2,815. This soldier had shattered it by more than 400 meters, a gulf so wide it seemed unreal. He leaned back, staring at the report as though the numbers themselves were alive. Operation after operation filled the file. Each one read like a story from the kind of movies recruits watched before realizing reality was sharper, harsher. Deadly ambushes stopped from impossible range. High-value targets dropped during storms that grounded aircraft, convoys saved from certain annihilation by her hand alone. The reports described shots taken at enemies running at full sprint, at distances where even stationary targets should have been untouchable. Robert closed the file for a moment, pressing his palms together as if in prayer. The Pentagon had sent him not just a sniper, but a force of nature, and tomorrow he would meet her face to face. The night air over the mountains pressed heavy and still, yet inside the command center Robert sat awake long after most had turned in. The file lay open across his desk, pages spread like fragments of a legend. He kept reading, eyes scanning over lines that felt more like myth than record. Each mission, each statistic carved Sophia deeper into his mind as something more than a soldier, something closer to a living weapon. The file did not speak of her childhood, yet her discipline was etched between the numbers. The way she carried her rifle like a part of herself had not come from training alone. It spoke of years shaped by ritual, of a will hardened long before she ever set foot in Afghanistan. Robert leaned back, the chair creaking beneath his weight. He could feel that his world, and the world of every man under his command, had shifted the moment she had stepped onto the dust-covered landing zone. At dawn the camp stirred, men gathered equipment, vehicles rumbled to life, orders crackled over radios. Robert walked the narrow path to the sniper's quarters. The door was slightly open. Inside he found her seated cross-legged on her bunk. The Barrett lay disassembled before her, each part arranged on a spotless white cloth. She worked silently, hands moving with precision, brushing carbon from the bolt until it gleamed, running a patch through the barrel until it came out bright white. Her motions were calm and practiced. Every click of metal against metal seemed measured, deliberate. Robert did not speak at first. He watched, fascinated by the care she poured into the weapon. It was less cleaning and more communion, a ritual performed not from habit, but from devotion. Hours passed, he realized. For her, this was not a chore, but a necessity. When she finished the last piece, she began again, reassembling with the same methodical rhythm. Robert noticed she never looked down at her hands. Her fingers moved with memory, sliding parts into place with a certainty that came only from thousands of repetitions. It struck him that the rifle was not just a tool. It was a partner, bound to her as tightly as flesh and bone. From beneath her bunk, she pulled a wooden case lined with foam. Inside were rows of large-caliber rounds. Each one gleamed with polished brass, the tips flawless. Robert leaned closer. He recognized immediately these were not standard issue. She had loaded them herself, each bullet crafted by hand. He imagined her late at night, measuring powder grains with a scale, checking brass casings for imperfections, polishing them until they reflected light, each round an oath that no shot would fail. At ranges beyond 2,000 meters, she knew, a fraction of an inch, a whisper of wind, a single grain too much or too little could turn success into tragedy. She opened a small notebook filled with columns of numbers, temperature readings, wind speeds, barometric pressures recorded day after day. The pages looked like the work of a scientist, not a soldier. Robert understood then. She was more than a marksman. She was a mathematician of death, a meteorologist of survival, calculating every force the mountains could conjure against her bullet. Most snipers relied on instinct, Robert thought, years of experience guiding the eye and hand. But Sophia placed her faith in calculation. She trusted physics, not chance. To her, the wind was not a mystery. It was an equation waiting to be solved. Robert could not help but ask in his low, steady voice, "What happens when you miss?" She paused, the cleaning rod still in her hand. For a moment she did not look at him. Then her eyes lifted, dark and sharp. "I do not miss. Every shot I take holds lives in its balance. One mistake is too many." She said it not with arrogance, but with a weight that pressed into the air between them. Later that afternoon, the intelligence briefing brought grim news. A young analyst placed photos across the table. His hands trembled as he spoke. Robert listened while Sophia remained in the corner, still and silent like a shadow. Intercepted transmissions revealed that word of her had spread through the valleys. Enemy fighters spoke of her, as if she were no longer human. They had given her names whispered in fear: the Angel of Death, the Ghost Woman. They said she could see through walls, that her bullets could find men in the dark, A bounty of 50,000 American dollars now rested on her head. Enough to tempt not only hardened fighters, but also farmers and shepherds desperate for escape from poverty. Robert felt his jaw tighten. 50,000 was enough to turn every stranger into a potential enemy. The analyst continued. Fighters across the province were converging. Some believed she was a spirit. Others swore she was a jinn sent to punish them. Sophia finally spoke, her voice low but steady. How many are we talking? The analyst swallowed hard. At least 300 active fighters, possibly 1,000 if the bounty spreads. Robert's fist struck the table. We will pull you from the field. You are too valuable to risk. Her eyes shifted to the map pinned on the wall. Her finger traced the ridges around the valley. Her words came calm, measured. If you hide me, their courage will grow. If I remain unseen, their fear will fade. But if I strike, their faith in the ghost will deepen. She pointed to a red circle marked deep in hostile territory. Intelligence had struggled for months to locate the bomb maker who had claimed countless lives. She knew where he would be. Her tone carried no hesitation. This is not suicide. This is opportunity. End him, and hundreds will live. Robert studied her. The analyst warned of the danger, of the commander who swore he would kill her and mount her rifle on his wall. But Sophia only allowed the faintest curve of a smile. He will be disappointed. Robert stared at the tactical map. The compound circled in red. The valley was a fortress of stone. The distance would exceed 2,800 meters. Wind uncertain. Terrain hostile. His heart told him the mission was madness. But when he looked at her, when he saw the quiet fire at her eyes, he understood the decision had already been made. When do we leave? He asked. She closed her notebook with deliberate care. The hunt had begun. Night draped itself over the valley like a heavy curtain. The mountains loomed as silent silhouettes against a sky scattered with pale stars. Inside the command post, Robert leaned over the radio, his headset pressed tight. The time was 0347 hours when the call came through, the voice sharp with fear. Bravo Patrol reporting movement in the village. Something is wrong. Robert stiffened. Intelligence had claimed the village was friendly, cleared of enemy presence. But in Afghanistan, words like routine and friendly were often traps disguised as comfort. Through the green haze of night vision, he spotted the patrol, 6 men moving down narrow streets, completely unaware that shadows were shifting into deadly shapes around them. Figures armed and waiting, weaving into position like hunters closing a net. It was a textbook L-shaped ambush, and his men were walking straight into it. Robert barked into the headset. "Where's Sophia?" Her calm voice replied, "Ridge northeast of the village, 1,800 meters. I see everything." Robert felt a cold knot in his chest. The distance was over a mile. The darkness and shifting winds made the shot nearly impossible. He ordered Bravo to pull back, but their reply was grim. "Civilians are inside the compound. If we retreat, they die." Then gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes flared from rooftops, from towers, from windows above the square. Tracers sliced the night into streaks of deadly light. Bravo teams scattered, diving for cover, pinned down by overlapping fire. The radio filled with their frantic shouts. They had nowhere to run. Robert turned his binoculars toward the chaos. He saw the enemy perfectly positioned. They had chosen their ground with precision. Bravo was trapped in the open. Death was seconds away. Then the Barrett thundered. Its roar rolled across the valley like a storm. The sound alone silenced the battlefield for a heartbeat. One muzzle flash vanished. Sophia's voice came through the headset, steady as stone. "Target down." Another boom shook the mountains. Another sniper silenced. She spoke again. "Target down." Her tone was clinical, detached, as though each shot was simply a number solved on a blackboard. Robert tracked through his binoculars, staring as muzzle flashes winked out one by one. Then the third shot came, echoing like thunder over peaks. The water tower fell quiet. The battlefield changed in an instant. The ambush dissolved into confusion. Bravo's radio crackled with disbelief. "Whoever is shooting, keep doing it. We are alive because of this ghost." Robert felt a rare grin spread across his face. He keyed his mic. "That is our new sniper. Welcome to the Sophia experience." When dawn arrived, he found her in the sniper's quarters. The room smelled faintly of oil and metal. Sophia sat cross-legged once again. The Barrett laid open like a puzzle. each piece cleaned with relentless attention. Her hands moved with the patience of ritual. Each motion a meditation. Robert did not interrupt. He simply stood watching as she scrubbed the barrel until it gleamed, polished the scope glass until it reflected like a mirror. She spent hours, 3 cleaning, 1 reassembling, 2 hand-loading ammunition. Robert realized this was her daily devotion, the discipline that made perfection possible. She lifted a round from the box, brass polish bright, her voice low as she explained, "Factory rounds hold tolerances in thousandths of an inch. At 3,000 meters, those tiny errors mean life or death, so I make my own." She showed him her weather station, instruments lined neatly on the sill, thermometer, barometer, anemometer, each feeding data into her tablet. She logged numbers in her notebook, page after page of precise conditions. Wind, humidity, air pressure, altitude. Robert stared. This was not instinct. This was science. She looked at him with calm certainty. Physics does not lie. It has no bad days. Robert asked softly, "What if you miss?" She froze for a moment, her eyes lifting to meet his. "I do not miss. I cannot. Every shot carries a life, usually more than one." Later that day, the analyst returned, his face pale, voice trembling as he spread photos across the table. Robert felt the weight of his words before they came. Intercepted chatter said she had become legend. Fighters now called her the Angel of Death, the ghost that killed from impossible distances. Some swore she was not human, that she was a spirit, a punishment sent to hunt them. A bounty had been placed, $50,000, enough to make every man in the province her enemy. Robert's gut twisted. He thought to ground her immediately, but Sophia spoke before he could. "If I vanish, they grow bold. If I shoot, their fear grows." She placed a finger on the map where intelligence circled the bomb-maker's compound. "This is where he will be. End him, and we save hundreds." Robert stared at the red circle deep in hostile terrain. The shot would be over 2,800 meters, uphill through shifting mountain air, near impossible. But when he saw the fire in her eyes, he knew this mission was no longer a choice. It was already fate. The next night, under a moonless sky, the team began their ascent. Robert led, Sergeant Michael and Corporal James at his side. Sophia followed, her rifle and gear heavy on her back, yet carried as if weightless. The climb was merciless. Narrow ledges, loose stones, winds that clawed at them with invisible hands. Yet she moved like smoke, flowing across rock faces that forced the others to crawl. At one point, James whispered over comms, "How is she doing that?" Michael answered quietly, "She grew up on mountains, probably learned to climb before she could walk." But Robert knew there was more. Something predatory lived in her stillness. She paused often, head tilted, listening to the mountain as if it spoke to her in a language only she understood. Hours later, they reached their ledge, 2,000 meters above the valley floor. From there, the compound sprawled below, guards pacing walls, figures moving between mud brick structures. Sophia set her scope, recording wind, humidity, air pressure, every calculation logged with relentless patience. When Robert asked if she was ready, she lay prone behind her rifle, her body merging with the earth. Her whisper drifted through the headset, "I have been ready all my life." And then they waited. The hours stretched on the mountainside. The team lay still as statues, watching the valley below, where the compound stirred with quiet menace. Robert shifted uncomfortably behind his spotting scope, his legs numb from holding position. Michael muttered curses under his breath, but Sophia did not move. She had lain prone for 6 straight hours, her breath so steady that Robert checked more than once to see if she still lived. The wind changed with the rise of the sun. Thin air from the peaks collided with heat rising from the valley floor. Dust devils danced and died across the compound walls. For Robert, it was a cruel torment. For Sophia, it was the language she had been waiting for. She adjusted her scope with minute twists, every breath measured, her hands as calm as if she were tuning an instrument. Movement stirred below. A man stepped into the courtyard, flanked by 2 guards. His long white beard and decorated rifle marked him clearly. Rashid, the bomb maker. His weapons had taken countless lives, convoys ripped apart by his IEDs, villages scarred by his ruthless tactics. Robert's pulse quickened. This was the chance, the reason they had crossed the mountains. Sophia whispered her calculations, distance 2,847 meters, wind shifting northeast, 10 knots, gusting 15, bullet flight time 3.2 seconds, margin for error none. Robert did the numbers in his head, and his stomach turned. The margin was beyond thin. Any sniper would have refused. Any ordinary marksman would have waited. But Sophia was no ordinary soldier. She slowed her breathing until her chest barely moved. Her body melted into the earth itself. Her finger rested gently on the trigger. Through Robert's scope, he saw Rashid pause in the center of the courtyard, exposed for a brief and fragile moment. Then the Barrett roared. The sound rolled across the peaks like thunder. Robert counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. In the courtyard, Rashid's head vanished in a spray of crimson mist. His body collapsed. The guards frozen in shock before chaos erupted. Shouts rose. Weapons lifted. The courtyard filled with panic. But the shot had cost them. The muzzle blast betrayed their position. Radio chatter from Overwatch came frantic. Dozens of enemy fighters were climbing the mountain, at least 30 closing in fast. Robert's blood ran cold. They were cornered, a small team pinned to a ridge with sheer drops on either side. The first rocket struck the cliff behind them. Shards of stone cut the air like knives. Gunfire erupted from below. The team dove for cover. Michael shouted that they were surrounded. James swore they were finished. Robert turned to order Sophia back. But she was gone. Her voice crackled through the headset. Calm as though nothing had changed. I am moving to secondary position. Hold them for 10 minutes. Robert barked for her to return. But her reply was sharp. I am not infantry. I am a hunter. The Barrett boomed again. A muzzle flash below went dark. Then another and another. The battlefield shifted. The 30 enemy fighters had come hunting, but found themselves hunted instead. Every few seconds a rifle thundered. Every time it spoke, another fighter fell. She moved constantly, never firing more than twice from one spot. The mountain itself became her ally. Her voice over comms remained cold. Clinical, tango down. Reloading, tango down. Robert realized with awe and dread that this was no battle. It was extermination. The enemy's organized assault crumbled into chaos. Men abandoned positions, running blindly to escape an invisible predator. The gunfire that had roared moments earlier fell into silence. The wind whispered through the stones, and the mountain was still again. At last she returned, climbing back to their ledge, her stride calm, her rifle slung across her back. Yet Robert saw her hands tremble, not with adrenaline, but with something deeper. Her eyes carried a hollow weight. She reported with cold precision. 31 confirmed. All threats neutralized, area secure. Robert studied her face and saw the cracks beneath the steel. When she sat to clean her rifle, her movements were mechanical, too precise, as if forcing herself not to shatter. Then came the whisper, so faint he almost missed it. They were only boys, most not older than 17. She held a photo she had pulled from one fallen fighter, a family smiling, children clinging to their father. Her voice broke for the first time. They were just kids carrying pictures of home. Robert felt the weight press into his chest. He had known her file, had seen the numbers, but he had not considered the cost. Every perfect shot meant a life taken without doubt. Every flawless calculation etched itself into her memory. She carried them all. Later in her quarters, he found her again, sitting quietly with a worn photograph in her hands. A man in marine dress blues stood beside a girl no older than 10, both holding rifles, his weapon a military issue, hers a small training piece. She spoke without looking up. That is my father, Gunnery Sergeant Michael. He trained me. He told me never to pull the trigger unless it saved lives. Never for revenge. Never for sport. Only for protection. Beside her bed sat a leather journal. Pages filled with names. Each name a life she had taken. Each line marked with date. Age. Reason Namad. 19. Bomb maker. Killed to save a convoy. Mahmoud. 22. Sniper. Killed to save 3 Marines. The list went on and on. Robert stared, stunned. You remember them all. She closed the book gently. If I take a life, I owe that person the respect of remembering. They are not targets. They are people, and I must carry them. Robert understood then why she had broken. It was not the killing itself. It was the weight of memory. 30 more names to add to her journal. 30 more faces to justify. to a father long gone, a father whose words haunted every shot she took. He asked her softly, "How do you carry it?" She lifted her eyes, dark and unflinching. "Very carefully, sir, very carefully." 3 days after the ambush, the air inside the command post felt heavier than usual. Robert entered the briefing room to find a CIA operative already waiting, his face drawn tight by sleepless nights. He spread surveillance photos across the table. A tall man with pale eyes and a predator's posture stared back from the grainy image. The name spoken was Dmitri, once Spetsnaz, now mercenary. They called him the Wolf. His reputation was carved from the graves of snipers he had hunted. He was known for 89 confirmed kills, his longest shot more than 2,600 meters. He was now in the province, and he had come for Sofia. Robert felt the blood in his veins turn colder. The operative spoke in grim tones. The Wolf had already claimed the lives of American snipers, leaving their rifles mounted like trophies. He studied his prey for weeks, learned their patterns, and then killed them in duels where only one walked away. He had been promised $200,000 and Sofia's Barrett as his prize. Sofia listened quietly, her posture still. When asked if she feared him, her lips curved faintly. "He has never faced me," she said. Robert tried to argue, to ground her, but she shook her head. "Every day I hide, he grows stronger. Every day I hunt, he grows weaker." The stage for their encounter was Shock Valley, a desolate arena of jagged cliffs and black stone. Robert and Michael watched from Overwatch 2 kilometers away, their scopes trained on the valley floor where Sofia had vanished in a shadow. Dmitri announced himself with arrogance, carving her name into a tree and leaving coordinates like a challenge. "Come alone, little ghost. Let us see who is hunter and who is prey." For hours Robert watched as two ghosts moved across the terrain, glimpses of fabric, flickers of shadow, then nothing. Shots cracked and echoed, each time a near miss. Each time one hunted the other only to vanish. Robert counted 17 exchanges across the valley. Dmitri was skilled, his movements precise, but Sofia denied him angles, refusing to play his game by the book. At last he broke cover, sprinting across open ground toward a cluster of rocks that promised a clear shot. It was a risk, and it cost him. The Barrett thundered from a position Robert had not even realized she had reached. The bullet crossed 1,800 meters in barely 2 seconds, threading through a narrow gap of stone. Dmitri stumbled, his rifle tumbling from his hands as his body fell forward into the dust. Her voice came calm over calms. "Tango down, the Wolf is dead." Yet there was little time to rest. Not long after, another call shattered the silence. A medevac helicopter had been struck, forced down in a canyon. 23 wounded men trapped with enemy forces closing in. Robert led a rescue team through treacherous terrain. Sofia ranged ahead, the Barrett heavy on her back. They reached the wreckage to find chaos. Survivors forming a desperate perimeter as muzzle flashes lit the canyon walls above. Sofia climbed to a ledge 800 meters out. From there her voice came over comms. 37 survivors counted, enemy positioning mortars on the ridge. If the mortars opened fire, it would be a massacre. Robert asked if she could reach them. Her answer was grim. "Not from this angle, but I can bring down the mountain." Robert almost refused, but then he watched as she positioned herself in the open, scope fixed on weak points in the rock face. 3 thunderous shots shattered the ridge. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the mountain groaned and collapsed. Tons of rock cascaded down, crushing mortar crews, blocking the southern approach. The survivors cheered, but Robert's blood froze. Sofia had cut herself off, trapped beyond a rockfall. Gunfire roared. A suicide bomber sprinted toward the crash site, his vest swollen with explosives. At the same time, a sniper on the northern ridge adjusted his scope towards Sofia's exposed ledge. Robert realized she had 1 shot left and 2 enemies. Save herself or save the wounded. He ordered her to take the sniper, but her reply came calm. "Those men have families waiting." Robert watched in disbelief as she adjusted her scope. Not on the bomber, but on a boulder high above him. The angle was wrong, the shot impossible. Yet she exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The round ricocheted from the canyon wall, struck the boulder, and sent it tumbling down. The bomber was crushed before reaching the survivors. At that same instant, the enemy sniper fired, his bullet shattering stone inches from Sophia's head. She rolled behind cover, blood on her face from fragments. But alive, the battle raged for hours. Robert's team fought through, extracting the survivors. When they finally reached her position, they found her unconscious, blood seeping from a wound. Her rifle lay beside her, scope cracked, but the weapon intact. Weeks later, Robert visited her in the hospital. She sat upright, hands steadying a new Barrett rifle, polished and gleaming. A gift from the families of those she had saved. Her bandages were fresh, her body weakened, but her eyes held the same intensity. He told her she should rest, that legends deserve peace. She looked up, her voice quiet but sharp. Legends do not retire. They reload. Robert felt a rare smile tug at the corners of his mouth. Somewhere in the mountains, he thought, the ghost would hunt again.